So think of it as if you're boiling your food in oil.
Got myself a carbon steel pan and everything, did the whole seasoning, and then I started getting more into the stainless steel pans where, I don't have to season and I could still fry an egg fine when I've started learning how to control the heat. The other thing is that layer of, they call it polymerized oil, right? I used to think of it as burnt oil, but polymerized oil, is that good for you? Is it fine?
Yes, I didn't know they were become a very big topic, actually.
Welcome to Food is Medicine, Medicine Meets Menu, the podcast where the art of culinary excellence meets the science of modern medicine. Join the world's first and finest chef-neurologist dynamic duo, Dr. Victor Wang and Chef Dennis Arvizu, as they dive into the powerful link between our dietary choices and our well-being. Uncover the impactful ways in which simple changes in diet can ward off chronic illnesses, sharpen mental acuity, and contribute to a longer, healthier life. And find out how the food choices you make can spice up your health for a tastier tomorrow.
Yeah, from what I've read recently, oils are not good.
Well, the one thing that's interesting for me is just in simple terms, like at home, of like what you can use to swap out oils. You obviously have extra virgin, but with its or smoke point, you
Right.
really shouldn't cook with it. But the other one is to use refined olive oil, and it still carries some of that culinary medicinal properties, not to the extent of extra virgin olive oil. But the key differentiator there is that the smoke point of refined olive oil.
Yeah. I think my thinking about that is that the olive oil, not necessarily extra virgin, just isn't as bad for you as supposedly the seed oils. But it just seems like there's a lot of conflicting research out there.
There is, and I think that to me the big key point is just when you burn the oil, you produce acrylamides, potential carcinogens. And so when we talk about smoke point, right, it's how hot you're heating the oil to. So most use canola even in restaurants, and that's at 400 degrees. Avocado oil has the highest, but it's the most expensive at 500. Refined olive oil is at 450. And one thing that I always keep in mind when I've done like some assessments at restaurants, especially that are heavy in fried food, they crank the fryer to 400 degrees to keep it up.
Mm-hmm.
So the oil itself is already burning up by the time they're using it, and it's just going through cycles and cycles faster. And so the stuff that you eat is loaded with all that toxicness.
Another question I have would be oils. In your experience in the restaurant industry, how often do restaurants reuse oils from like the day before?
Loaded question.
That's what I figured.
Because it goes back to the principle of the type of oil you use. So let's just say you're a cognizant, sustainable business owner, that you care about your product. You care about the well-being of your consumers. They need to filter the oil, but as sediment falls into the fryer, it starts burning it and degrading the quality of oil. So a lot of modern fryers have built-in pumps and filter systems, so you can filter the oil and preserve it that way. You could also buy an external filter. You could do it manually, which a lot of restaurants will do. And otherwise, it's just there until it gets to that point where it impacts the flavor a bit. It's funny you touched on this because the other day we went out for quick bite, and I ordered calamari. To me, it's one of those telltale things about oil. So as a consumer, let's just say the calamari comes out looking more white, like pale white, but it's hot and it's crispy, it's a good sign that that oil is pretty well maintained, or it's been
Fairly fresh.
fairly fresh. Now, if you get soggy calamari with some nice brownness to it and some mediocre flavor, there's a good chance that oil has been from prehistoric era.
What did you say? Yogurt flavored?
Just interesting flavor.
Interesting flavored.
Because the other part, especially with smaller locations, is in the fryer, they fry everything, whether it's vegetables, chicken, fish, shellfish. So if you're a person that is severely allergic to some of these items, it's important that you ask if there is a separate fryer, because If you are allergic to shellfish, there's a good chance
Right.
you'll have a severe allergic reaction. For fryer oil, a good one is peanut oil.
Peanut
But
oil.
of course, it goes back to individuals are allergic to peanuts, and that in restaurants the big one that they use is canola. They look at it from the both sides of it has a pretty decent smoke point and it's at a reasonable price. The thing is, like I was saying, when restaurants are packed and they flood the fryer, the temperature drops, so they'll crank it up to keep it at a higher temperature, and at the same time it's just degrading the quality of oil and producing.
Yeah, and higher temperatures, from what I know, creates more harmful products or harmful reactants for health wise. So yeah, and I don't know too much about frying foods. I've always wondered about like double frying because I know some places double fry things at different temperatures, and maybe you could talk about that. Like, what's the reason for that, and what kind of what's the goal of double frying, or what's the goal of a certain temperature for an oil for a certain type of food?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, you double fry for a different reason. If we stick with basic French fries, if a business makes their own fries, because many do not, they buy the frozen something, and that's what most people are used to.
Yeah.
But if you make your own potatoes at home, let's just say you wanted to make your own French fries, so you do need to cook the potato. Business usually call it blanched. So you cook it at a lower temperature, roughly around 275, 300 degrees. So it cooks out moisture in the potato, makes it soft. You pull it, and then you refry it at a higher temperature, let's say 350 to 375. So you crisp up the outside. Same concept with like fried chicken, right? Like if you do a battered chicken, you want to cook the chicken, but you need to cook it at a lower temperature so you can burn it from the outside and it doesn't cook through. So essentially, it's like think of it as if you're boiling your food in oil to remove the water content, and then you let it sit cool, and then you fry it like if you would normally to get that crispiness. So for a lot of the items that you buy that are frozen, they've been probably flash fried. That's you're doing the second batch of frying to finish it.
Right. So from what you're saying, it sounds like if you fry at too low a temperature, you just get a soggy mess because you're removing the water from the food.
You are removing it, but at the same time, you're degrading the quality of the product, right? Because at a certain point, imagine if you're like boiling a potato on the stove.
Right.
At some point, that potato will just become mush in your water.
Oh, yeah. So you're trying to fry something hot enough, but not too long.
You're essentially trying to cook it off. Yes.
And then I guess if you go the other direction and you um, fry at too high a temperature, you're going to burn it.
Correct.
And so I would assume, like, if you're cooking something like tempura, that's
Mhm.
a different temperature than French fries and fried chicken, or is it all pretty much the same? Or does it
No,
depend on
with
the breading?
tempura, it is high,
Okay.
and depending on the product you're doing, it's
Carrots
so
and broccoli.
yeah. So those you would put in raw, fry it hot, and that residual heat that gets trapped in from the tempura finishes off the product. So
Oh,
that would be one straight, frying method, but you do fry it at a higher temperature, so you get that airiness.
right.
And the thing is that, like we're saying earlier, if you're using canola oil at 400 degrees, it starts to smoke and build the potential carcinogens for that are harmful for consumers. So as somebody gets 10, 15 orders of tempura and they're trying to fry that, oil drops, temperature drops.
And I
So
assume
think of
that's the reason you don't want to be frying, like, say you have a big batch of tempura or a big batch of carrots and broccoli, whatever, potato, that you want to cook. You don't want to put all of it in all at once because that's something I always forget about is like that also brings down the temperature of the oil if you're putting too much in at a time.
Yeah, so those are some of the tricks that the kitchen will do to try to handle that um, surplus load. So I always say it's like look at the tachometer of a car, right? You don't want to get your car to go red line, right? Every now and then if you red line it, it's okay. But if you're constantly in the red, you're going to burn the heck out of your engine, your oil. It's basically the same thing with the fryer.
Right.
You don't want to get it into that red line, but during busy
That's a
times
good
and
way to think
everything,
about it.
they're constantly in the red.
Huh. This is actually a good topic I didn't think about. I think that's good enough for today.
Thank you for joining us on Food as Medicine, Medicine Meets Menu. We hope today's episode has inspired you to rethink the role of food in your health journey. Remember, the power to nourish your body and mind lies on your plate. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review and share Food as Medicine, Medicine Meets Menu on all major podcast platforms with others who are passionate about living well. Until next time, keep experimenting in the kitchen and discovering the powerful, healing potential that lies within every meal.